Well, I'm sure you noticed Saturday people were pretty interested in that initial depth chart release with Micah being listed as the kick returner and his response on social media. Where do things stand realistically on Micah being involved in that competition and actually getting the football in his hands this fall?
Well, first of all, the depth chart thing was really just a perception thing. I think it was a little bit of us not all being in the same room when we went through it, because I just saw it differently when it went out. I saw the first two guys listed as the two returners that would be on the field, which is accurate. It would be Journey Brown and Micah Parsons. And then, who's the returner? Well, it depends on which way they kick the ball, right? And I don't know which way each team's going to kick the ball. But I guess the perception was the first guy listed would be the returner, and the second guy would, I guess, be the off returner. It's just not how I saw it. So it wasn't meant to be funny or to fool anybody or anything. It was just, I guess, a difference in perception. But, I think that Coach Franklin and I have had many conversations about Micah running the ball, getting the ball in his hands. Obviously, he was effective at that in high school, and we're certainly not afraid to do that. But, he's back there listed as a returner, just like he was last season. And a lot of people don't just kick the ball to our right, especially if we're good on kickoff return, as I expect us to be. At the last place that I was at, they actually kicked away from our returner a lot more often than they kicked to him. So I think it's just a game plan thing. Certainly, we're not afraid to put the ball in his hands, but Journey's obviously a very, very, effective possibility also. So it's definitely out there as an option. Again, it wasn't meant to fool anybody. It was just a perception of how that was listed was a little bit different.
Hey, Joe. Rich Scarsella. When it comes to linebackers, how would you describe the relationship between Micah and Brent Pry, and what do you think makes it work?
Oh, I think the relationship is really, really special. Being able to observe it. Number one, it comes from the fact that they're both really good people. And Coach Pry is a lot more than just a football coach to a lot of us, myself included. But I think he's like a, I wouldn't say necessarily a father figure, but like a mentor to Micah. I think it always helps when you personally recruit the guy, and it's so it's in Coach Pry's area. So he would have initially, before I was here, obviously, but he would have initially identified him as a very young kid, started to develop the relationship. So it's his area and it's his position. So there's a long-standing history that builds that relationship, just like any relationship that takes time. And then I think Micah, seeing that Brent, Coach Pry, I should say, is someone who genuinely cares about him and loves him. If he didn't play football tomorrow, I don't think you'd see much, besides the obvious not being at practice and those things. I don't think you'd see much difference in their relationship at all. They have the kind of relationship where they'll be talking on the phone and texting in 20, 30, 40 years. I guarantee it. So I think it's just really a compliment to Coach Pry. And it's not just unique with Micah, it's with all of our players. But it shows his character, and why he does this is because he cares about kids and cares about people. And I think everybody, and specifically since you're asking about Micah, see that, and it develops a genuine relationship that's much, much deeper than football.
Next up is Audrey Snyder, The Athletic.
Hey, Joe, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you, Audrey.
I'm wondering a little bit about your punter situation now. Obviously, Blake was such a mainstay here. What do you like about Jordan Stout back there? And have you had any, interactions with him? We saw him send out a couple videos earlier this spring on Twitter.
Yeah, good question. It's kind of a unique situation. Thankfully, we got Jordan, last year, who really is a combo guy. We were going to take a punter in last year's class. We had all the top guys in the country at our camps, or I went and saw them, depending on the situation, and just didn't feel like there was one that necessarily either we thought was good enough or one that was good enough that fit Penn State. And you got to be really careful with those positions, because typically you only get one scholarship. So it's a lot different than, say, and I'm not saying you ever want to make a mistake, but to give you an example, we have, 13 or 14 defensive tackles on scholarship. Well, if one of those guys doesn't quite pan out the way we thought he would, we'll probably be okay, because you got 12 or 13 other guys, right? It's different with specialists because you just get one guy. And so if you're going to offer a guy, you got to make sure that that they fit to a T every single category, from a talent standpoint, from a fit at Penn State, from academics, all the different boxes that you have to check. And between Coach Franklin and myself and some of the kicking instructors that I respect and value, we just didn't think there was a guy that fit those boxes last year. And then it also turns out in watching Jordan through the fall and through the summer last year that we wouldn't have gotten a punter that was better than him anyways. I don't think there'll be any question of whether Jordan is good enough to fill in for Blake. And obviously Blake was fantastic. That's nothing to minimize his value. I just think Jordan's that good also. It's just going to be making sure that we manage, him being able to do the kickoffs, the long field goals, and the punts. And what does that look like? A lot of people don't do that. Oklahoma did it a couple years ago. They had a guy that did all three. He was drafted. I think that Jordan is that a similar caliber of talent, in my opinion. It's really just going to be managing the workload on him and making sure that one, if he's becoming a great punter, we don't have any drop off on kickoff, because we were really, really good at that last year. And so making sure that we manage the workload throughout the season, the off season, the game weeks, fall camp, all those kind of things, making sure that we're really conscientious. And I've reached out to a bunch of people that have been in this situation, that have used guys for both in the past to see. I really kind of put it in baseball terms, like what's the right pitch count per day to make sure that a guy, can stay healthy and do both. And so I'm excited about Jordan. I think he's going to do a really, really, really good job. He's very, very talented. And I'm really thankful that we took him last year, because we really took him as a kicker, but because he's such a good combo guy, it allowed us to not panic and to be patient and make great decisions. And there's some fantastic punters in this year's class and in next year's class that we've identified that I think that, we'll all be really excited about.
Next up is Donnie Collins, Times Tribune.
Hey, Coach, thanks for doing this morning. I want to follow up on Jordan a little bit. Are you guys considering him as the holder, and how does that mesh with his responsibilities as the longer field goal kicking guy? And as a follow-up to that, how long does it take to develop a good holder? What are some of the intricacies you look for in that?
Yeah, so we are looking at him as a holder. Obviously when you go to a long field goal, then you'd have to have a different holder, right? But Jake Pinniger is also very capable of doing long field goals, just so everybody knows. It just, when we charted it in the fall, there was just a slight difference on the short field goals and a slight difference on the long field goals. It wasn't like there was a major difference. So Jake, could also do all of it. There are some nuances. I won't get into the details of the techniques, because I think that'll get boring for you guys. For me, I'm really simple. And you know how I develop a holder? I ask the kicker who he wants, because the number one thing is that they are comfortable with that guy. Obviously, it's like some people use quarterbacks or receivers. The advantage to using a specialist is that's all those guys do all the time during practice. So if it's a quarterback, he might do it in 10 minutes before practice, but then he goes and focuses on being a quarterback, which I think we all would like him to do, myself included, right? If it's a specialist, that's all they do every day for 2 hours is work on their special, unique skill set. So, Joe Calcagno can do it. Bradley King can do it. But honestly, what I do is I pull the guys in individually, whoever it is, whether it be, for instance, you saw Jordan was listed the other day. Well, that's because I asked Jake, if we went out tomorrow, obviously we wanted spring, we all know that. But if we went out tomorrow, who would you want to hold? And he immediately said, Jordan. So that's my answer, right? And so it's not something I'm worried about. It's not like it's not an important skill, because when we go to kick a game winner, everybody in the stadium and myself and you guys, it'll all be really important then. But it's not something that I've ever not been able to find a guy. We'll have a guy and have a competent guy. Who that is today, honestly, I just, without spring, I can't say it. But I know if we went out today right now and kicked a shorter field goal, Jake would kick it and Jordan would hold it, if that answers your question.
Next up is Mark Brennan, Lions 247.
Hey, Joe. KJ obviously did so much for you guys as a return man last year. How do you go about replacing him, given that you don't have spring practice? And how many guys might be in kind of the mix for both of those jobs, because you have so many players who were talented return guys in high school?
Yeah, we've got a bunch of guys that I'm really excited about. One of the things with KJ, and it's to take nothing from him, obviously KJ's a spectacular talent, but people just didn't kick and punt to us. And when they did, the punters were oftentimes scared. You could tell they'd been overcoached during the week, and they didn't punt well. We only had 21 returnable punts last year, and people just didn't kick off to us very often. For instance, in the bowl game, I was at Memphis. Obviously, I know their punter. He's really, really good. Well, their coach, him and I talked before the game. They actually instructed him to punt out of bounds. So I don't have it right in front of me, but their punter's average, I think, was like 43 or 44. Well, against us in the game, it was 33. So basically, every time they punted the ball, they just gave us a first down, right? So, again, KG's phenomenal. So, but I actually expect better production out of those units because I think people won't know as much about our guys, and so at least early on, until we prove we are what I think we can be, I think people will kick and punt to us without as much fear, and that may open up some more possibilities for better play in the return game, which I expect.
Next up, we have Greg Pickle, Penn Live.
Coach, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Hey, you mentioned looking at specialists in the last class, obviously looking ahead to the future now with Coach Smith saying last week that this class is probably going to be a little bit smaller than the one you signed last year. Do you think a specialist has to be a part of the plan this year? And how do you evaluate those guys, especially with the potential of not having not having camps maybe, or a reduction in camps and spring evaluation opportunities because of everything that's going on?
Yeah, good question. So I don't think you ever want to paint yourself into a box of saying you have to take a guy in a certain year, because as I've already outlined, when you only get one, man, you can't make a mistake or it'll set your program back a long, long way. So we'll never paint ourselves into that box. How you want to do it, though, in a perfect world, so everybody's aware, is you want to, when your guy's going to be a senior, okay, you want to sign a guy in that class. So you would, in a perfect world, sign a kicker, for instance, in this 21 class, right? Because that way they would come in when Jordan and Jake were seniors, right? They would be able to learn from those guys, watch what those guys do at practice, see how they handle game day, see how they handle game week, see how they handle the off season, all those kind of things, and really get that year under their belt. From a football standpoint, from a strength and conditioning standpoint, from an academic standpoint, from a social standpoint. And then that next year, they're ready to go. And you feel like they've had a year in a college football program before they have to walk out in Beaver Stadium in front of that big crowd, because that's a big stage to be on. And especially when it's just people don't realize it's more spotlight than even a quarterback. I mean, everybody on kickoff is staring at that kicker, right? Everybody on field goal, everybody on punt, everybody is looking at that guy. And so it's an abnormal amount of pressure for guys. So you really want to bring them in, redshirt them, let your seniors finish up, and then go forward that way. So obviously, with that being said, you would like to get a punter and a kicker, because you're going to be in that situation in both positions, depending on how things work out. Guys still develop and everything. We have guys in the program that will still develop. But in a perfect world, you'd like to do it that way. In a small class, sometimes you can have guys be preferred walk-ons. You could gray shirt people. You could sign them in that class. I mean, there's a lot of different variations of how you can do things. The thing that I respect and appreciate here is our head coach values special teams. So he understands that Blake Gillikin probably had just as much impact on us winning as Sean Clifford, right? And again, that's a compliment to Blake and a compliment to Sean. I don't mean that in any other way, but I could go through. Jordan Stout had just as much as, so-and-so. We were number one in the country in special teams efficiency, which basically is basically gauges field position, right? And if you don't think field position helps you win football games, and I'm not saying you don't, but if people don't understand that, they're wrong. It's a major, major factor. And it had a big impact on us in a lot of games last year. Michigan comes to mind. I don't have it in front of me again, but I remember the Sunday after Michigan started like 5 times inside the 20 or something crazy like that. So Coach Franklin recognizes that. So, but like I said, we'll never paint ourselves into a corner. If we need to wait a year to get the right guy and the best guy, we'll do that. I'm on top of it. It's what I do all day, every day. And that combined with the fact that Coach Franklin puts an emphasis on it, we're always going to have good specialists, and I'm going to make sure that we do.
Next up is Frank Bodani, York Daily Record.
Hey, Joe. Wanted to ask, how was it frustrating at all last season because you guys didn't get a chance to really return the ball the way that you wanted to? And how do you continually adjust for that? Because teams could start to do that again this year coming up.
Yeah, it can be frustrating at times, but what I try to do is look at the big picture. You know, it's not about me being the number one special teams coach in the world, or us having like I always tell the guys, we're not going to be the number one punt block team in the country and rough the punter 4 times, right? That's not going to be the deal. So what I try to look at, what I look at is what's it doing for our football team, right? So maybe we're not, like I said in the bowl game, maybe we didn't get the punt return yardage that I would have liked to have gotten the bowl game, but every time they punted the ball, we got a first down. I think if you asked any team in the country, would they take that? They would take that. So what I look at is how are our special teams, our return units, our coverage units, whatever they are, how are they impacting our team, right? And then as you said, try to adjust. You know, can it be frustrating at times as a coach? It can, because you know what you have, but other people watch film and they know what KJ is too, so they weren't going to kick to him. The place I was at before, we were really, really, really good on special teams, specifically kick return and punt return. So I've been, kind of used to people not kicking to our guys, and there are some creative things that you can do. You just have to balance, especially year one, trying to be too cute and too creative with also keeping things really, really simple. We only have two goals on special teams: to own the ball, right? So we don't want to give up possessions. There was a drastic improvement in that last year. And then no penalties. There was a little bit of an improvement in that last year. I want to see more improvement in that. Had we eliminated, just to put it in perspective for you, I looked it up this morning. Had we eliminated penalties, which I know you can't say that after the fact, but just as a teaching tool for the players I'm going to use, if we didn't have penalties on punt return, we would have been 6th in the country on punt return alone. So even though all the things I've already said about people not punting the ball, well, that had nothing to do with how they punted, or nothing to do with KJ. That had to do with us getting penalties, right? So also controlling what we can control, but mostly looking at the big picture and making sure that I don't just get caught up in my special teams world. It's not just about me. It's not just about our special teams. It's about how is it impacting our football team. If it's a detriment, then I'm going to have a real problem with it. But, if people are like I said, punting the ball and we're getting good field position because they're doing a lot of bad punts, which you saw a bunch of. Would I rather see KJ return them for touchdowns? Yes, but that's all. It's still good for our football team for our offense to have good starting field position, and that's how I look at it. And we study that every week. The first thing Coach Franklin and I talk about is, did we win the field position battle?
Next up is Joe Giuliano, Philadelphia Inquirer.
Good morning, Joe. Thanks for your time today.
No problem.
You've always mentioned that it's the big thing about special teams is competition at every position. How difficult has it been to, or is it to judge punters and kickers remotely and not being able to see them, in person?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that, and I think somebody asked earlier, and I didn't fully answer that. Obviously, it's very, very difficult. The nice thing, having done this for a long time, is that I have some connections in the kicking world that I really trust. Guys that have worked with people for, that have worked for these kids for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And so you're just gonna have to lean more on those guys, more on their evaluations. And I do that anyways, to be honest with you. Obviously you want your own in-person evaluation. There's nothing like that. We typically at camp take them into Beaver Stadium, try to put them under some pressure, make them kick in front of Coach Franklin, which is, pressure on a 16, 17-year-old kid. So we can't do those things, but I don't want to mention specific people because I don't want to offend anybody, but some of the best kicking coaches in the country I've worked with since I started my career in 1997 and have great relationships with. And so they've seen those kids, not in the same situations, but in those types of situations at different camps that they've ran. And they also know the kids, the personality of the kids, the personality of the parents, even a lot better than I ever could, because most of them have been working with them, as I said, for numerous years. So it's going to be leaning more on those guys and more on what their evaluations were, obviously in conjunction with the high school coach, talking to high school coaches and stuff, just like we normally would. but mainly leaning on those guys. Film is very difficult with specialists. With other positions, you can really get a great film evaluation. We still watch the film, but it's different because you don't know what the wind conditions are. You don't know how warm it is. You don't know if that film's cut up. I mean, I'm terrible, and I could go put together 10 good kicks today. If I kick 300, I might kick 10's probably an exaggeration, maybe 5, okay? 5 good ones. But my point is I could make a cut up, right, and then send it to you, and it might look good. So it's a unique deal in that you can't – not that you can't. We still watch it, but it's not the same film evaluation as other positions. So really leaning on those contacts that I've developed over the last, 22, whatever that is, years. One of the guys that I work with a lot, he and I were going through a couple of days ago, the last 11 guys that he has helped me recruit, that he sent to our schools, the last 11 have gone on to play in the NFL. Not all of them made it, but they were brought into NFL camps. So that shows you the kind of relationship, that I'll lean on really heavy at these times.
We got time for a few more. John Patishnock, happyvalley.com.
Hey, good morning, Joe. Thanks for your time today, and hope you and your family are doing well.
Thank you.
Hey, the XFL incorporated a number of kickoff rule changes for the few games that they had this season. Were there any rule changes there, or just kickoff rule changes overall that you think would benefit the college game?
I wish I could answer your question, but I heard about some things, but we never get to watch that stuff. So my daughter told me about it one time. So I can't intelligently say it just because I don't even know the rules, to be honest with you. I saw that they were condensed on the kickoffs or something like that. The number one thing for me is always going to be player safety. But sometimes I also think there's a perception that guys get hurt on certain plays that they don't get hurt on. Certainly I'm not the expert at that either, but I know in my career I've heard people say, well, they get hurt on this play, and I think that's not where guys get hurt, in my opinion. But player safety is always going to be the number one thing, and I support any rule that puts player safety first. And I heard there was some really cool stuff. I wish I could answer your question better. I never watched a single game. I watched like one quarter with my daughter one time, but we're usually so busy at that time that I just didn't get to check it out.
Next up, Ben Jones, statecollege.com.
Hey, Joe, this is a little off the field, but I'm curious if everything that's going on has ruined any of your fishing plans for the summer, and how have things sort of been for you on the home front?
Leave it to Ben. My wife just asked me that question today. No, we're doing great. Coach Franklin keeps us really busy around here, so there's not been much fishing as of right now, although I have a buddy that works at the fly shop that told me it's been great. Hopefully we get to still have our summer, but, fishing and all that stuff's fun, but nothing's more important than, like right now, I'd kill to go back to work, just to be around the office, be around the players, be around the guys. You really miss that stuff more than I ever thought I would. Sometimes you get so into the grind that you think, man, I wish I could just go fishing every day or something. But when you actually have the time and you don't have the other thing, you really miss it more. So I hope we get our summer, because it's a special time for our family, and it's just kind of become a tradition. But, nothing's more important to me. I don't mean nothing, you know what I mean. But Penn State football is my priority, along with my family, and whatever it takes for us to get back and have a season and get things back to normal. I mean, I really miss our coaches. I really miss our players. And while I hope we have vacation, if we can play football in the fall and it means sacrificing something, I'll be the first one in line to do it. I promise you that. Now, hopefully Coach Franklin will give me a little bit of a break one of these weekends, and I'll get out and fish around here, though, because like I said, I heard it's awesome.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Coach.
Thanks, man. If anybody has anything else, Greg, they can get with me anytime.